Hello, Adam. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Hey Jens, very good. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. You will not believe it, but it's the first podcast episode, and it's episode number 184, I believe, which I talk and I interview someone on design thinking topics. And
You got
that
it.
being a human innovation podcast, I can't believe it. So it's
Well, it's
I
an
I,
honor.
I did a little bit because I interviewed one of my former colleagues who is designer, Lee Gammon. She was talking a little bit about cultural design, and that was in episode number I think 83. No, 38. So it was early on. So pleasure to have you. Before
No,
we go into design thinking and innovation topics, tell me a little bit about music. You're a musician.
that's right. Yes, I am. Oh gosh, so where to start? So yeah, high school picked up guitar because I was no good at sports, so I figured I had to get good at something. Um, and yeah, no, always just loved it. Writing songs, put together a few groups around the over the next couple of decades, and like writing stuff, going around playing for people, just having fun with it.
And you're still doing that next to running all the different business adventures you have.
Oh, I wish I could say I was. I was part of a touring band back around up to around 2010, 2011. But then, you know, I think a lot of the, young kids start showing up and there's a lot of focus on kind of building up the business and stuff over those years. But now I just pretty much pick up the guitar and write songs with my daughter. That's where my illustrious rock star journey has taken me.
That's awesome. Are you publishing the songs or are you keeping them just for your daughter and for the family?
Oh yeah, now no, we don't. We had nothing leaves the house pretty much. Maybe when she's a little older, we'll become one of those really obnoxious father and daughter. I'm thinking about the Cyruses here. I mean, that's really what we're aiming for. You know, if I could be Billy Ray, she could be Miley. It'd be fantastic.
Sounds good. So, I mean, give us a little bit of background other than the other than music part. So, how did you get to where you are today?
I tell you, by sheer luck and accidental kind of happenstance. Um, I think like many people, I left undergrad with very very blurry at best idea of what I might want to do in my life, right? So you think you're 22 years old or something like that, and you're just trying to figure out the basics. And um, always was a pretty creative kind of guy. At least I enjoyed doing stuff like that. Like enjoyed working with people. But then I think when it came to kind of picking a major and things like that, it was like I couldn't really find, well, fine arts didn't feel quite right, and also it was always a lot of pressure, and I think good pressure too, coming from the family to say, like, you got to get something that's going to earn a living on the back end of that. So kind of coming from that, I was the first kid from our family to go to college, actually. So there was kind of like this double pressure, like don't waste this on on something that doesn't give you a job at the end of it. So I got a business degree, and I had zero interest in it. Like quite literally zero interest in it. But I did fairly well, and I did what you had to do, and and then I had a kind of a dumb bit of luck. A good friend of mine had graduated a year before me from undergrad, and he got a job at Ernst and Young, so Ernst and Young Consulting. And he's like, "Hey, I can refer you for a job at Ernst and Young." And I thought, well, I've never had any burning desire to work for a big consultancy. I'm like, 22 years old. I'm like, I don't even really know what a big consultancy is or does. Um, but he's like, yeah, I could put in a reference. I thought, well, cool. That sorts that job thing. That was easy. And I just was cool, great. So I took the job, and honestly, when I got there, there's something kind of cool happened. I met a partner who was working out in San Francisco, who for some reason saw some kind of potential in me. He said, "Listen, we've got this accelerated solutions environment where we're using the design shop methodology. This is back in like 1998 or something like that, right? So this is going way back. Um, and he's like, "Yeah, you seem like kind of a creative guy. Why don't we take you out of this stuff and put you into this?" And then suddenly it all started becoming fun. And I think I was a little bit terrified that I was heading into a business job that I wouldn't really like, but would kind of have to do in order to tick the boxes of having a career and earning your keep in the world. But I found myself actually really getting a kick out of this stuff, and it was basically there where I was introduced to the fundamentals of human centered design.
Mm.
Mainly worked out in San Francisco with that team out there, and it was that's kind of how it all got started.
What kind of projects did you work on at that time?
Oh gosh, they pardon me. Um, I mean, so they were your typical sort of mentioned large corporate consulting gigs where it might be what we would call transformation today.
Mm.
Where working with I guess Procter and Gamble. I know we did a lot of work with them. America West Airlines. I was a big client worked with. I mean, they're gone now. Not our
Yeah.
fault. Um, but it would be kind of the engagement would be sort of your long multi-month, sometimes multi-year project where the team that I was working with would usually come in for components of that. Sometimes I'd be stuck on it for 4 months, 6 months. Worked for Ford up in Detroit for about that period of time. They were launching a big, at the time, really revolutionary kind of e-procurement marketplace, and we were part of the project team that took that from like the initial design through to implementation. That was really cool. But our role was to kind of bring some of these creative methods to the consulting teams who were doing a lot more of the kind of the technical, more kind of hardcore analytics side of it.
Yeah. What brought you into building your own business and having all the amazing collaborations you have, which we will go more into details later? What brought you into stepping out of the, let's say, corporate world and building your own thing?
Well, I it's again, life's one of those things that does sort of just happen. Make tons of plans, but then things
Yeah.
happen. And I guess one of the things that happened here is I after a few years at EY, which were great. I got nothing but good stuff to say about that place for getting me started and kind of introducing me to a great network. It's funny, like the alumni network from Ernst and Young's nuts. Like still have people that I'm in contact with even from way back then. Um, but so I went back to to grad school because I thought I would do something a little bit different. I thought I was going to get into international affairs. I thought that would be my thing. And then I started to see some of the jobs that the guys were getting at the CIA and stuff like that I was graduating with. And I thought, oh no, I don't think this is for me. They ended up doing stuff just like spending all day looking at satellite pictures of train tracks and stuff like that. I said, oh no, this is horrible. This sounds terrible. So then I got an MBA, kind of for the same reasons I got the business degree. I thought, listen, I better get something to kind of safeguard myself here. I'm coming out with student loans. I better make sure I don't fall flat on my face after this. Um, and so I got the MBA, but I got an opportunity to join actually some former E&Y colleagues who were of all things building up the executive education function for the University of Cambridge, the Judge Business School over in the UK. And because I had the kind of innovation experience at Ernst and Young, they said, "Listen, we need this kind of innovation component to build this exec ed piece, not just the content, but also sort of the facilitation to bring it all together." And and the offer was made. I said, "Why don't you come to London for maybe a year, two, three?" I thought three max. I thought three would be it. That was 2006, I believe. Um, Next thing you know, you've got a wife and kids and a house, and you know you're basically British. But but yeah, so that was the kind of the opportunity of kind of working with Cambridge, working with that team, and I worked with that group for a few years. And then very sadly, the founding partner that passed away very suddenly, and he was a wonderful guy named John Kelly, and he was a real mentor and a real friend. And at that point, it was kind of a decision whether to continue on in the UK, and which would mean kind of starting my own thing, or heading back to the US and sort of seeing what happened next. And I decided, no, there's this is good. I want to kind of keep going with the innovation work. And that's when I started Treehouse. And that was back in 2010. So about 12 years ago.
Tell us more about what Treehouse is, so that the listeners get an understanding of what you do.
Sure thing. So Treehouse is a innovation design consultancy. So we work with all kinds of different clients to work with them to develop new products, new services, new strategies, processes, and fundamentally using a human-centered design methodology, right? So called design thinking, that type of work. So there's a lean startup and all those things kind of come
Yeah.
into it. Um, and yeah, I mean, we're based in London. There's around 20 of us is the kind of the core team. We work with the associate network. We've kind of grown to that size over the last 12 years. And yeah, the clients we work with are really across the board. We've done things like improving the clinical trial experience for a large pharmaceutical company. We've worked with a big retailer to help them kind of redesign the customer retail buying experience, and especially in the wake of COVID, what that means. So, and we work with law firms, accountancies, media companies. It's really, PlayStation, one of our most fun clients. Um, so all over the place industry wise. Um, and the last thing I would say, if there's one thing that makes us a little bit different than other organizations that do the similar work is, we'll do these projects and we love doing these projects with our clients, but we really try to aim for self sufficiency for the clients. Like
Yeah.
it sounds silly, but we want to get ourselves, you know, we want people to become as independent as quickly as possible. Um, and while that might sound like we're kind of doing ourselves out of some work, what we find is when you make people self reliant, that creates that partnership and honestly leads to much longer, better, healthier relationships with your clients.
Yeah, I agree. It builds the trust, so that they want to work with you further because they know you're not trying to stay in. Like, let's say I come from the corporate world. I know how it works, and I've worked in consultancy as well with one of the big ones, where you try to stay in as long as possible.
Yep. Yep.
That's the strategy.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And we've yeah, kind of a leap of faith. Um, based on some kind of shared experience. I mean, the team that we've got, the sort of leadership team at Treehouse, all of us have been doing this for a long time.
Yeah,
We come from, for example, like Nathan Waterhouse, our MD. He's a 12-year IDEO veteran. We also have Elle, who's Elle Tong. She came from Fujitsu. She was head of co-creation there. We all kind of come from these larger organizations, and I think we've all sort of seen that you say if you can kind of build that trust, really keep the client's best interest like genuinely at heart, not just sticking in there, as you say, you end up staying in there much longer
yeah,
because new opportunities and typically bigger opportunities show up.
yeah.
Not
I
just
agree.
doing more of the same thing, but do things that matter even more to that client.
Yeah, and the benefit with you team. I mean, I've interviewed Steve Baker on this podcast
Yeah,
as well, who introduced us. The benefit with colleagues like him and the others you mentioned is they come from that world. So it's not that they're grown up in one of the consultancies and do this their whole life. When you have been working on the other side, then it's easier to speak the same language as well on client
yeah,
side. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Let's get into human-centered design and
Mm,
design thinking. Let's start a little bit. How do you define it for Treehouse and or for yourself, so that we get a little bit settled for those, because I've never interviewed anyone.
right,
For those who have never heard about this, which is maybe like one or two listeners.
right. Yeah, I mean, it's design thinking. God, it's one of those terms. It's just been it's been out there for a while, and it's got a lot of associations with it. And it's like, what makes it special? I think or what is it? I think the most fundamental way of of understanding design thinking, at least the way we think about it here, it is starting with a very intentional step back from your own sort of biases, your own views, your own preferences, your own judgment, your own experience, and leaning in very heavily into the user's experience. So it's that big leap into empathy and allowing yourself to be like really immersed in the user's world before you allow yourself to start coming up with any ideas for how best to solve the challenge at hand. So is the empathy, starting with empathy, and then once you've come back with some insights, then it's bringing as diverse a group of people together as you can to generate a whole lot of ideas, not getting too attached to those ideas, but then going into a very rapid phase of prototyping, testing, just scrappy mock-ups, and these are the things that they're making their way into conventional business culture more and more every
Yeah,
day. Um, but I think when we say what is design thinking, I think it's taking those kind of new habits around leading with empathy, not your own ideas, bringing diverse groups together to generate a lot of ideas, and then doing assumption testing, experimentation, rapid prototyping to get to those good solutions quickly. I think design thinking is basically just one way of packaging those behaviors, those techniques into a single sort of guiding philosophy, a guiding framework.
yeah. Working with organizations, like you said, it's a kind of buzzword and everyone knows it, or
Mm.
everyone thinks they know it, and everyone says, "Yeah, we're listening to our customers." That's what you hear
Yeah.
all the time when you work with companies and working in big companies as well. What are you doing differently? Let's say when you work with a company and they have a challenge, and you kind of take them on board and say, "Okay, we're helping you now figuring this out." What do you do differently than they would do themselves?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and because more and more today, you will hear exactly that. Like, well, customer listening. Oh, we do that. We had some training about customer closeness a couple months ago, and it's nine. And listen, in some cases, people are doing it, and they're doing really well. A lot of we've seen so many sort of call them traditional corporates hire in design talent in the last few
Yeah,
years. I mean, it's tough to I mean, we've been trying to hire in at Treehouse recently, and you see so many job postings now from places that never would have been hiring human-centered designers, but now they are. They're gobbling them up and bringing them in. So we're coming across a lot more of the sort of our peers and colleagues inside these large organizations than we used to. But I would still say the most common case is you'll find an organization that says, "Yeah, we're doing the customer thing, we're listening," and then you realize actually it's just market research. It
yeah,
is questionnaires. It is surveys. It is we tapped 1,000 people and they said this is what they wanted. Um, so I think one of the biggest kind of first moves we always have to be ready for is that move away from without making people feel like they're wrong, or like
yeah,
it's not you doing this wrong, you've just been doing something different. This has value, but that value is this. What we're proposing is trying to identify those things that the customer can't even ask for, right? Not the kind of things that would show up in a survey, but let's get down to what are those motivations? What are those unarticulated needs that are far more interesting if we're seeking to do something that's truly new? Because if someone can ask for something on a survey, they can ask all your competitors, they can ask, it's already out there. We're trying to go for the stuff that's not already out there, and then making that distinction is usually a good way into getting people to try something different.
yeah. I love that because it's kind of this listening between the lines where you try to find out what is truly behind the
Yeah,
surface. You can't do with a survey.
yeah,
You can try, but it's not going to work if you're not meeting with the people and don't proper engage with them.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'd say there's just a really quick, kind of funny anecdote. Years ago, we were working with a fresh produce company in the UK, and they wanted us to innovate around, of all things, berries, like strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, that stuff, and the way they sort of package them and distribute them and all that stuff. And we said, okay, let's do it. We grabbed it as a project. Let's start doing some ethnographic research. Let's go out into the stores. And the first thing their marketing department equipped us with a survey of the approved questions that we could ask. And they said, "No, this is it's not going to help. It's not going to help at all." And after a bit of struggle, we finally got them to say, "Okay, you guys go, do what you do, but please don't make us look bad or get us sued." Um, what we did, we sent a lot of our, usually working in pairs, sent teams out to different places to observe and do some interviewing. And, we went to places like, Tesco and Marks and Spencers and those kind of places where people would buy these, little baskets of blueberries and stuff like that. And there was this one woman that we observed, and she was walking down the produce aisle. And the first thing she did, she took a grape off the stalk and she popped it in her mouth and ate it. We thought, okay, right, we'll keep an eye on this one because we're doing the very standing back, just observing people. And she goes through the aisle and she picked up this thing of raspberries, and she starts to shake it, and she starts to holding it up to the light, getting her face in to smell these things, all this, and she's making her choice that way. Like, wow, okay, some really pronounced behaviors here. Okay,
Yeah.
this is interesting. This is like an extreme user, as we would say. Okay, let's go talk to her. And she comes back around this when we stop. I was like, can we ask you a few questions? And we said, could you tell us how do you make your berry buying decision? Expecting all this stuff. And she said, on price as her sole criteria. Okay. Okay. So interesting on price. And then what it came down to is just a good example of how, she was doing all this stuff and all these processes were happening. She was doing all this evaluation using these very tactile, visceral, sensory kind of criteria, but she was doing it on a subconscious level. She it would have never have occurred to her to tell us about any of that stuff because the moment she was actually hit with the question, price, but clearly there was so much more.
Yeah.
And I think I've always loved that story just because it just really shows the limitation. If you hit that one with a survey, all you know is the same thing that everyone will tell you is I'd rather pay less for really great stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, just a quick story there.
Talking about stories, how important are stories inside of the design thinking process and the way you work?
They are the kind of the primary currency, and I think yeah, it's so I think as far as the way we work, we're always capturing user stories. That's just part of the designer's toolkit, being able to gather a lot of disparate information and then weave together an insight-based narrative to share it with your team. And then those stories end up being tied to personas that we're designing for, and so it's always in there. It's always interwoven. But I think that's nothing new, right? That's how designers work. Where we see the importance of stories, going back to these corporate organizations that don't necessarily have these kinds of methods ingrained already, is you have to never underestimate how different some of these methods are, like that, going away from market research, getting into like real empathy led kind of ethnography in search of insights. And you never can underestimate how challenging that change can be culturally for organizations. And the number one way of getting that cultural shift to happen is by collecting and sharing really good stories.
Yeah.
And those stories have to come from the organization. They have to be real. They have to be, they have to be clear, because once people start hearing about, their team, not IDEO or Google or Amazon or any of these guys, but, people in their law firm or their pharmaceutical company or their whatever, using these different kind of methods and actually getting different, better results, that's when that changes. But without those stories, those new practices really struggle to get traction.
Yeah. I would like to dig deeper on how you work with the clients and companies. You said that you're kind of creating the empowerment that they can do this themselves afterwards. How do you guide them as part of what you're doing? I mean, of course, you're there to deliver the outcome. That's
Yeah.
one part, and the other part is kind of educating and empowering them to do that. How do you involve them in the whole process?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's not a single answer for it. I think the first thing we'll do when we're working with an organization is understand, like, if you can imagine a spectrum, and it's the kind of, we'll call it the outcome spectrum. Like, what do you want to get out of working with us, right?
Right.
What are we here for? Is it because we need to come up with like a mission critical solution, right? A new product, a new service that has to succeed in the market. So if that's solution focus here. And then on the other end, learning, right? We need our people to be able to go off and do this themselves really effectively. And usually when you present people with that, it's like, well, we'd like both, please. You know, that's a tall order, um, because if you are working with a team that is brand new to this, they need to get a few sort of cycles of practice under their belt before they're going to be really effective. And you want to stake, a big bet on them sort of cracking that intractable, business challenge right out of the gate. Um, and in fact, that's one of the things that we see is a real um, stumbling block for a lot of organizations is they will say, okay, train our people up and let them loose on a big solution. And if they're a big challenge, and if they don't come back with a great solution, then it's like, well, this didn't work. Let's move on to the next, silver bullet. Um, so that is a challenge. But so the way we try to do it is, if we're working on let's say we're working on a solution critical challenge, to begin with, we'll work with them to identify some kind of internal champions or catalysts, those people who do want to lead the charge but know they need some development. And we will have them work with us and in a shadowing capacity,
Hmm.
right? So onus is on us to deliver that solution as it would be for any consultancy, but we're also transferring that knowledge as we go. Then you can do, there's trainings you can do throughout to kind of, accelerate that whole process. Um, and then we try to kind of move folks into, let's give you some coaching to start doing this yourself. But that main kind of, there's one critical success factor there is, again, even after they've shadowed us, had some training, again, don't give them that big challenge that no one's been able to solve for 10 years and their jobs depend on it, because they're going to struggle. They need a couple of revs doing it themselves. Confidence goes up. They become those ambassadors, and it's in there. So it's not overnight, I think, is the message. And sometimes it's not what organizations want to hear.
Yeah. I was about to say that most of the organizations, specifically right now, and I think already the last couple of years, are focused on saving cost as much as possible and getting things as fast as possible.
Yep.
And with the approach you choose, it's kind of your take. I don't know. Maybe you need to rectify this. It's like you're not delivering as fast due to the fact that you're educating on the same time.
Well, I'd say it doesn't. If we're just talking about the solution outcome,
Hmm.
it won't necessarily go any slower just because we're
Okay.
working with a team. Um, if the outcome is the required outcome is a great solution, that's what our team is focusing on,
Yeah.
and the kind of transfer can happen in parallel without causing a lot of friction or slowdown. I think the what can be perceived as a slowdown, I think, though, is when it is sort of handed prematurely
Yeah.
over to
Yeah.
that team and the wrong expectations are set. Um, I think that so kind of getting a real internal team up to speed, that needs some time to nurture. It needs opportunities to practice. Um, and yeah, and if there's a lot of support in the organization and there are a lot of opportunities to practice, with kind of increasing levels of criticality, then that can go a lot faster. But often you'll find people are having to do this alongside their day jobs. Maybe that support isn't quite there as much as it needs to be throughout the organization, and all those things can slow that down.
To that point, what do you believe companies can do to get people onboarded in these topics better, so that on one hand they can do projects themselves, and on the other hand they can work efficiently with external support?
I mean, the number one thing is leaders need to be really consistent and really clear about what their expectations are and what support is available. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. And there are a lot of things that go into, sort of how do you create this culture of innovation? How do you build internal
Yeah.
innovation capability? But the top one, like if you don't have it, you're stuffed, is that genuine leadership support. That sounds a little cliche and maybe obvious, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen organizations put all the right stuff in place and have leaders going, "Yay, innovation! Yeah, we're going to do this," but then sort of step away from the process and only come back when these teams are, like, "Wow, we've been given the innovation go ahead," and they come back with solutions that are going to feel like, especially if they've done it right, they're going to feel unfamiliar, they're going to feel new, they're going to feel
Mm.
kind of risky, they're going to be untested, it's going to be, dare I say, innovative, right? It's going to be different than a lot of the leaders are expecting. And we've seen on too many occasions leaders say, well, where are we going to get the budget for this, or that'll never work, or we tried something like that 15 years ago and now it's a, this is, and then again, boom, crush them. And that can knock an initiative like that absolutely dead in its tracks. So whenever we work with a company that really is serious about trying to embed this, it is not enough for leadership just to be writing the checks for the consulting or the training. They have to really get it. They got to know what it looks like. They got to know what behaviors to kind of recognize, reward, to model with their teams. Because if they don't have that, just giving the thumbs up to innovation, but then questioning why. We had a similar thing where we were teaching a group to kind of show up with a rough storyboard as opposed to a big PowerPoint and Excel doc for a new idea. And
Yeah.
someone did this. They brought it to a leader, and this person said, "Why are you wasting my time with an idea that isn't ready? It's not ready." But that's the whole point. We don't want ready. We don't want to spend all this time building something that we don't even know if the fundamental assumptions are going to hold up. So yeah, leaders got to be they have to be deeply, deeply engaged, not signing the checks, um, for that really to take root.
Yeah, I can't agree more. That's the whole thing I'm working with as well. If
Yeah,
if the For me it's the whole leadership, because just one leader for me is not enough, because
no,
they're changing too often. If they're
yep,
changing, then someone else is taking over, or they get a new person in, and then the rest is not on board. Then it's crushed again. So it's kind of wasted efforts, because you always have the 3 to 5 year cycle of leaders, and then it's okay. Let's start from step one again.
yeah. Let's convince someone else that.
So before we go into design thinking for law, which I would like you to explain a little bit, tell me more about the future suitcase prototype you guys did.
Oh, the that was something else. Um, so yeah, we were working with a company called Freudenberg, um, and they are so a large, very very large engineering business, and we were working with their top leadership team, and we uh, we needed to kind of showcase how a few different technologies, things around blockchain, AI, and some other things that would that are going to be influencing the way their products, will live in the marketplace. How this could all come together, and we needed to do it in a innovative and kind of quick, creative way. So we used a method called design fiction, which is a really cool, what would you even call it, a practice or competency. It's this idea of, we're all familiar with science fiction, right?
Mm.
So films about things far in the future. Um, Design fiction kind of pulls that time frame forward a little bit, but uses filmmaking as a prototyping process, form like diegetic prototyping. And it's done in a way where you co-create with the client. And so that's what we did. We worked, and we formed actually a joint venture called Bowman and Poole, um, which we did with a joint venture with a company called Big Small TV. They're a great film production company based in London. Um, and so we worked with Big Small under the Bowman and Poole joint venture to create a series of short design fiction pieces that we worked with the client to build. And we used this suitcase. I gave it some goofy name like Robo Case or something like that um, to highlight though how their whole supply chain would be altered, how blockchain would be incorporated, how AI and AR would be built into this process, but showing all the different touch points with their business, all through this story of a person kind of taking a trip going through. We got unbelievable access to Frankfurt Airport to do filming, even on the tarmac. It was ridiculous. I'm not quite sure how that was legal, but we did it. Um, but yeah, so really, a really cool way. Again, kind of going back to your point about stories. These technologies can feel really inaccessible and abstract, but when you sort of hook them in to a simple narrative about someone having a commonplace experience, like going through an airport and having their suitcase with them, um, it becomes a lot more human, and it also allows you to start kind of you know, connecting these things to real human experiences, which again brings you right back to the how we prioritize, how we design, and ultimately for this group, sort of how does our strategy get shaped by understanding these new technologies in that context.
Yeah, I've seen the video. It's fascinating. It's really, really cool. So congrats to that. For everyone who wants to see that video, you can find it on treehouseinnovation.com, and then you will need to navigate. I think it was towards joint ventures, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Ventures, Bowman and Poole,
yeah.
and special bonus points for anyone who can figure out why the design fiction company is called Bowman and Poole.
It's yeah. I haven't digged into that. I guess there's a fun story behind that as well.
Yeah, it won't be told because then the bonus points would have no meaning.
Exactly. So if anyone finds it out, let us know. So design thinking for law. How
Right.
did you came up with that? What dragged you guys into that as well?
Oh, it's a great question. As far as how we got into it, we never woke up and said, "Hey guys, let's go to human-centered design with lawyers. That'd be fun. Let's go for it. Who's in?" Um, you know, Pile on the tube. Head down to Central Line, Bishopsgate. No, it really is like many things in life, right? We had an opportunity to work with a couple of firms, and like many industries, I think law is this way, probably even more so. They're a bit insular. It's not the right word, not insular, but they're their own world, and everyone kind of knows each other in that world, and they are really distinct from other professional service firms, even like consultancies and accountancies, and very distinct from corporates who are their clients. And I think there's a certain element of once you understand that culture and you know that it is a very delivery driven culture, and you understand the billable hour, and you understand how partnership works, and you understand just the kind of environment that people are needing to apply these methods in. Um, I think word kind of spreads quickly that, hey, those guys at Treehouse actually get it. They actually understand us better than others. And over the years, we've ended up working with more law firms. I think probably any other innovation and design consultancy like us actually has. Um, so yes, I think it was just sort of a word of mouth is how we started doing so much work in that sector.
Yeah, I I, I can imagine it's fascinating too because I have a couple of friends who are lawyers, and
Yeah,
like they're so always on the detail on everything. Is like no, 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 no. There's no creativity in this.
it's it's a tough one, right? Because um, if you think about the legal sector or you think about the legal profession, what's your job? To eradicate risk and
Yeah,
uncertainty
yeah,
for your, and that, as you say, that comes through precision and it comes from being right. You've got to be right. Your lawyer needs to. I want my lawyer to be right. I don't. I. And you think then what's innovation? All the stuff we were talking about before. It's about assuming a beginner's mindset and exploring the opportunity space and not leading with your own experience and your own solutions. And those things feel unnatural. Same like things like experimentation. We talked about, you know, all this. If you, we were initially saying what's design thinking, I talked
yeah,
about the
yeah,
MVP, bringing people together for ideation. You know that's not that common of a practice to bring people from across the firm together to solve a problem. It's usually done in its sector or its practice area. Um, and then experimentation, right, flies in the face of those basic fundamentals. Um, so kind of on the surface, it feels like a really tough environment to innovate within. But our experience has been that, I mean, I don't know your lawyer friends, but I'm gonna guess they're pretty bright,
yeah. They
because
are
most,
super smart,
absolutely, and I
smart
tell you that
ass.
that is that's a real asset when it
Yeah,
comes to innovating, right? So you look at who these folks are. You've got typically very smart, very driven, natural problem solvers, right?
yeah,
And there's a lot of creativity. Like, I mean, a huge amount of creativity. Some of the most important kind of creativity that goes into that. But what makes working with lawyers for us a lot of fun is we'll often step into a room with these really smart, really creative people. Just like I say, natural problem solvers, that kind of creativity. But they don't think of themselves as creative at all.
yeah,
And one of the things that's nice about a design thinking process is that you can lay it out in a sequential sort of step one, step two kind of formula for creativity. Now, we know that framework is a bit artificial and there's a lot more wiggle room in there, but the security that it can give someone who might not consider themselves creative is really powerful. Like, oh, okay, well, there's something solid that I can follow here. And we've seen it so many times. You give a group of lawyers a process to help them be more systematically creative. They latch onto it and they run with it and they do amazing things with it. It's a lot of light bulbs go on, a lot of, wow, I didn't think I was creative. This has really unlocked that for me. And, you know, without naming names, I mean, I can tell you that some of the outcomes we've had working with groups in the legal sector have surpassed in terms of, even if you just looked at pure raw creativity and novelty and inspiration, some of the things that have emerged from teams that from sectors from like media or like these quote unquote creative industries. Um, so yeah, it's really refreshing, really exciting because you're often showing people a side of themselves that they didn't realize that they had.
yeah. Is there any problem you solved which you can share?
Oh gosh, in the legal sector,
Yeah,
to be honest with you, I would want to think about that before I said a single word
that's
because
fine.
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you other sectors, but that's one where, yeah, I mean, I can tell you generally is kind of the things that we work on,
Yeah,
um, because there's definitely a higher sense of confidentiality and sensitivity in that space, and for obvious reasons. But the kind of things that we've worked on, no firm specific info here, but everything from you know client engagement models, service delivery models, even the way um, even the way services are bundled, priced, those kinds of things, like really strict commercial stuff,
mm,
all the way to working with firms deliver um, like basically non-legal services to their clients, and that's something I can say that DLA Piper has been absolutely amazing at working with Jenna Blount and her team there to basically build a human-centered design practice within the law firm that works with their clients to solve problems around gender inequality, or
mm,
dealing with things with their supply chains. Getting into this whole new world. But what makes that really powerful is if you've got that sort of creative capacity built into your legal service provider. They might find this marvelous solution, and then when it comes to implementing it, they've also got that powerhouse of kind of legal service to go, okay, how do we now get down to the brass tacks of making this work? So yeah, so it's been kind of all innovating within the sector, but also starting more and more to innovate beyond the
yeah,
sector.
yeah. Super interesting. I've never worked with a law company, but I can imagine it sounds like fun. Getting us into innovation mindset.
Yes.
Tell us, who is Professor Jan Liedtke, and
Oh,
what cooperation do you do with her?
Jean Litka is so she's first of all, she's like a personal hero for me. I've been a fan of hers for a very very long time, since before we even started the company. And so she's a professor out of the University of Virginia Darden School of Business. And I mean, I can honestly say she is one of the leading thinkers in human centered design thinking. Um, she gets it on a level that I think is very rare, and she brings a certain candor and authenticity to talking about what really makes it work, what makes it stick, and what makes it not work and fail, and get get stumble inside organizations. That I think is really important for right now, and really relevant. So we met Jean about 2 years ago because she was working with a team who was actually using. We have an innovation platform called Sprint Base that we released a couple of years ago, and it's used in a lot of universities to help teams do their innovation projects and things like that. It's kind of, if you're familiar with things like Mural and Miro and things like that. It's imagine a more structured and scaffolded version of that. That's Sprint Base. So Gene kind of got curious about that. We started a conversation and really hit it off. We had sort of, I think, a very similar view of kind of the role that design can play in the world. Also, the belief that it needs to be kind of taken off of a pedestal a little bit and broken down into really some tangible behavior changes that people can make that can really have a massive impact on the way they show up and the kind of results that they get, especially when they're working in teams. And she at the time was working on a new book at the time that we met called Experiencing Design, that was really all about that notion of how, as an innovator, as a designer, when we start to do these different things, like these different practices, we start to experience these things differently, which leads to a sort of becoming, a change within that individual. And this real focus on that innovator's journey of kind of evolving and changing through practice and deepening of that practice really struck a chord. And she sent me a draft copy of her book to review, and I did, and I got really excited. I said, "Gene, we got to collaborate. We got to start. Um, let's work together to get this stuff out to the world." And And that's where the assessment came from. And the assessment is actually now called Innovation Impact. Mindset was feeling a little bit too passive. So
Mm.
that's a change that's coming in the next few weeks. And it's now the Innovation Impact Competency Profile. And it is, it's exactly that. It's helping people identify those specific behaviors, skills, and mindsets all together that enable them to actually make a real impact with innovation, with design.
Yeah. How
Yeah.
can it be used as an individual, like me for myself, and how can it be used from corporations?
So we've got plenty of use cases for both, even though it's relatively new. It's only been out in the market for a few months. Um, a lot of individuals will take the assessment. It's a self-assessment, right? So at its most basic, you're getting some clarity around, what are those behaviors that matter, and so there's a heightened self-awareness that comes from that. Um, you give yourself a score across those behaviors, and then your report will give you some really practical, tangible actions that you can take to deepen or improve, close some of those gaps, right? So it tells you where your strengths and opportunities to develop are. So that's a really practical thing. When you move that up to the team level, you can do a team profile. We just did that with a large consultancy earlier this week, where they were looking at, where are our team's different levels of confidence across these skills and mindsets, and what does that mean for how we collaborate? What's that mean for, who can be maybe a source of support and insight around one area and kind of help bring the rest of the team up the curve? So that's really great. Um, but what's coming really soon, next few weeks, we're doing a peer assessment will be launched. So it's kind of the 360 sort
Yeah.
of thing where maybe I think I show up as the most empathetic and human centered, guy on the block. But my colleague goes, "No, man, all you're ever doing is leading with your own ideas and passing left and right." And you go, "Oh, okay. Yikes." Um, so that's a really powerful thing when you get to see from the perspective of people that you're really working with, how you actually show up. So that's coming up. And then organizationally, yeah, it's we've got an assessment that is tailored to, building out. So what's the kind of collective profile of the organization, and then there's also an ROI assessment. Jean's got so much unbelievable research, and her author team, Karen Hold, Jessica Eldridge, just amazing to work with. Um, and yeah, we're really excited because we're just starting to roll these out. And on the ROI side, we're just starting to try it out with some beta clients, and yeah, just it's making a lot of the things that we've always kind of known and believed and experienced about design. It's making them a lot more tangible and data based, data backed.
Yeah. I mean, I can talk for the corporate world, working in the corporate, this type of profiles and assessments, like it does with other assessments, like with leadership assessments and so on, they always help if you know how to use them properly and translate them into actions into the organization. And I think that's, I mean, specifically when you go individual, team, and then peer assessments, like you just explained, it's going to be awesome if it's used properly. Then the whole organization can shift
Yeah.
by finding out, okay, where do we have a gap? When you put a team together, you can say, okay, we need this skill set, we need this capabilities because we're lacking it.
Yep. Yep. And we've been some of the most sort of like, impressive and exciting use cases that we've had have come exactly from that type of work, saying, what's the kind of team we need to put together, and and then also saying, you don't want everyone to be the same, right? You want to have
Exactly.
diversity of strength, and and then kind of having a bit of a model and understanding within the team, just kind of like, yeah, we're all showing up at different places. We've all got different strengths, and there's huge opportunities to draw on those strengths and also help each other out. Where can we help that person kind of level up where they might want to or need to?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I will definitely follow you guys and see if I can use that topics as well in
Oh,
my
absolutely.
world.
That's great. Thanks,
Awesome.
man.
And of course, we will put the link to it as well into the show notes so people can straight away click through it and do the assessment or read more about it.
Very
Getting
cool.
to the end of the podcast, coming up with a couple of questions I'm asking every guest.
Okay.
What is a project, or if you could be part of a project, either leading it or just being part of it, that is impacting every human being on Earth? What project would you like to work with and why?
Oh,
It's a small
Jens,
question, I know.
you could have given me a little warning on that one, could you? Wow. So a project that's going to affect every human being on Earth. I mean, obviously the first, well, maybe not obviously, but the first thing that goes to mind, of course, is around climate. That's the first thing. Um, but if there was something that would, I think honestly, I think the if there was one thing that a project I could work on, this is, I'm thinking out loud here, but if there was a project that was truly about kind of creating shared understanding and empathy, uh, like across diversity, and I'm not just talking about sort of like within one community or one, but I think if we're talking about globally, I think the extent to which, and we the risk of sounding a bit cheeseball here, but I do genuinely mean it, that I've been very lucky. I've gotten to travel all over the world. I've gotten to
Mm,
live in India for a while. I've been in Russia. I've been in, all throughout Asia and China. I've been very, very lucky. And the one thing that I think is struck me is just how damned similar people truly
yes.
are. Fundamentals are unbelievably um, consistent, and you can make friends with just about anybody. The moment things get into governments, the moment things get into ideologies, the moment things get into policies, and then the media gets involved, and then you
Yeah.
know, it's very easy to get ourselves all pitted against each other and go, "That's them, and this is us." You know, I would love to work on a project that is focused on helping people make those fundamental connections and sidestepping the nonsense and the noise. I think that keeps us at each other's throats and slows down our progress. So I'm not sure we're going to get to fund that, but if you've got any idea, Jens, let me know.
Yeah. I agree. Having lived in 6 countries myself and have been traveling around the world and as well lived in Russia with all the things happening right now and having still very, very, very good friends in Russia. Yeah, we don't, we are not too different, and we can understand each other if we allow
Yeah,
it to happen. And that's, yeah, a challenge worldwide.
yeah.
Next question. What advice would you give to a young innovator that's just getting started?
That's a great question. I think experiment, and um, do try, put yourself out there, put yourself in the path of opportunities, because you never know where they're going to come from. Get involved. Um, if I look back, not to say that I, would hold my career up as a case study in how to, achieve innovation greatness, but just in the course of this conversation, I'm just aware of how many of the most sort of formative and kind of fundamental um, developments in my career came simply from having conversations when I didn't necessarily have to, or making connections, putting my hand up to try something. Hey, would you like to be a part of this new thing out in California? Sure, sounds good. Hey, would you like to move to England to try this out? Hell with it, let's give it a
Uh,
shot. And I think seeking opportunities and just throwing yourself in, and not having any illusion that you have complete control over where your career is going to take you, but allow yourself to sort of go with the flow, go with the current, and just keep your eyes open for really cool people doing really cool things, and just get yourself involved.
yeah, love that. Next question is, what is an innovative topic you are interested in exploring over the next couple of years?
Right. I mean, well, one area that we're about to launch a real focus on is artificial intelligence. just because it is, obviously it's a hot topic.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about it, but the sophistication of that conversation is still pretty low in most cases, and we're starting to work with some great folks who are bringing a deeper level of insight um, to that. And yeah, so I think that as far as something that's going to shape our world in ways that we may not fully grasp right now, yeah, AI is definitely an innovation topic that's top on the list for us.
Yeah. Cool. Adam, last question. How can people reach out to you and where can people find you?
Oh, that's an easy one, Jens. I was expecting a real,
No, no.
a real brain crusher here at the end. No, that's easy. I mean, so yeah. Honestly, the Treehouse Innovation website is pretty. So it's just treehouseinnovation.com. Um, you can find us on link. You can find me on LinkedIn is also pretty good. Just Adam Billing. And Treehouse has all of our social links from the website. We're always writing and talking and stuff. So we'd love to get everybody involved in the conversation. Would love to hear from any of your listeners.
Yeah, I love your blog. It's really, really nice, curated in on your website as well. Very good
Cool.
one.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Adam, thank you very much for being in the show. I could talk 20 hours more with you and hope to have a round two one day.
Hey,
Was a
it's been a
pleasure.
pleasure.
Oh,
Absolutely, Jens. Thanks so much for having me. Really enjoyed it. Yeah, and if I'm up for round two, whenever you are.
thank you. Thanks for listening to today's episode. You will find the links and resources in the show notes of this episode. If you would like to support the podcast, the most impactful thing you can do is subscribing to the show on any of the podcasting platforms and give me a review. This will help me to reach more innovators around the world and bring some of you into the show. If you have any question to the guest or want to engage with me, feel free to reach out to me on social media and contact me there.